The grand hall of the Xerath Empire's palace shimmered with an eerie, otherworldly glow. Blue and silver lights reflected off crystalline walls, casting sharp, angular shadows that seemed alive. Lucas, a young human xenobiologist, stood awkwardly in the middle of it all, clutching his equipment bag. His breath hitched as his gaze darted across the vast room, filled with towering alien figures, each cloaked in regal robes. The aliens' eyes glowed faintly, their elongated limbs and sharp features giving them an ethereal appearance. He felt like an insect under their piercing stares. Lucas had no idea why he had been summoned. He was no diplomat, no warrior. He was just a scientist. When the Queen's guards had appeared at his lab, he had no choice but to follow them. Now, standing under the unblinking gaze of Queen Verexithra herself, he wished he could disappear. The Queen sat upon a throne that seemed to grow naturally out of the crystalline floor. Her presence was overwhelming. Tall and impossibly elegant, her silver skin seemed to ripple like liquid under the light. Her piercing violet eyes locked onto Lucas, studying him with a mix of curiosity and disdain. "You are the human they call Lucas," she said, her voice cold but melodic, echoing slightly in the chamber. Lucas swallowed hard and nodded. "Ah, yes, Your Majesty," he managed, his voice trembling. "You are here because I have allowed it," she continued, leaning forward slightly. "Do you understand the honor that has been bestowed upon you?" Lucas wasn't sure if it was an honor or a death sentence. He nodded again, unable to find the right words. "I have a condition," the Queen said, her tone sharp. "An affliction no Xerath healer can cure. My advisors believe you, a human, may hold the key." Lucas blinked, shocked. Why him? Why a human? The Xerath were known for their disdain of his species, considering humans primitive and insignificant. Before he could speak, the Queen's voice hardened. "You are the only human I permit to touch me, Lucas. If you fail, the consequences for your species will be severe." The threat hung heavy in the air, and Lucas felt his stomach churn. But beyond the fear, a spark of curiosity ignited. He had never encountered an alien condition that humans were uniquely equipped to solve. This was a challenge, and challenges were what he lived for. "I'll do my best, Your Majesty," he said, his voice steadier now. "But I'll need to examine you and understand the nature of this affliction." A flicker of something, approval, perhaps, crossed the Queen's face before she gestured for him to step closer. The guards tensed, but she raised a hand to stop them. Lucas approached cautiously, his heart pounding. The Queen leaned back, her gaze unwavering. "Proceed, human. But remember, your actions will decide the fate of your kind." As Lucas began his examination, he couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was the beginning of something much larger than himself. Lucas stood just a few feet away from Queen Verexithra, his heart thudding in his chest like a drum. Her violet eyes followed his every move, and though her face remained unreadable, her presence radiated an air of authority that made his every step feel heavier. Around them, the other Xerath court members stood silently, their glowing eyes filled with suspicion and contempt for the human in their midst. "Explain what you intend to do," the Queen said, her voice cutting through the tense silence. Lucas cleared his throat, trying to keep his hand steady as he unpacked a small device from his bag. It was a portable scanner, a mix of human ingenuity and borrowed alien technology. "I'll run a scan of your vitals, Your Majesty. It won't hurt, but it will show me if there's anything unusual in your system." The Queen raised an elegant eyebrow. "Everything about me is unusual to you, human. Be more specific." Lucas hesitated, realizing she wasn't wrong. He took a deep breath. "I'm looking for patterns, infections, toxins, or anomalies, something that doesn't match the natural biology of your species." Without another word, the Queen leaned back in her throne, her shimmering silver skin catching the light. "Proceed." Lucas activated the scanner, its soft hum breaking the silence. A faint blue light danced across the Queen's form as the device began its work. The readings appeared on a small screen, and Lucas frowned. The Queen's vitals were strong, almost unnaturally so, but there was a strange energy signature pulsing through her bloodstream. "What is it?" the Queen asked, her tone sharp as she noticed his expression. "There's something in your body," Lucas said cautiously. "It's not biological. It's artificial. Nanotechnology, I think." A murmur rippled through the court. The Queen's advisors exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to speak. "Nonsense," one of the advisors finally hissed, stepping forward. He was a tall Exarath with deep blue skin and sharp features. "The Queen's body is pure. A human cannot possibly understand what you see." Lucas didn't back down. "With all due respect, my equipment doesn't lie. These readings show a network of microscopic machines in her bloodstream. They're ancient, but they're still active." Queen Verexithra raised a hand, silencing her advisor. Her gaze remained locked on Lucas. "How do you know this, human?" Lucas hesitated. "Nanotechnology is rare but not unknown to humans. I've studied cases like this before, though nothing on this scale. This technology is advanced. More advanced than anything I've ever seen." The Queen's expression didn't change, but her voice softened, just barely. "You believe you can help me?" Lucas nodded, his confidence growing. "I'll need time to study this. But yes, I think I can." The Queen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Then understand this, human. If you succeed, you will earn more than my gratitude. If you fail..." She let the sentence hang, but the threat was clear. Lucas swallowed hard. "I understand, Your Majesty." As he packed up his equipment, Lucas couldn't help but feel the weight of the task ahead. This wasn't just about curing the Queen. It was about unraveling a mystery older and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Lucas sat in a small, dimly lit chamber within the Exarath Palace. The walls shimmered faintly, their crystalline structure pulsing with a slow, calming rhythm. Despite the serene surroundings, his mind was anything but calm. His portable scanner was spread out before him, its display showing the puzzling data he had gathered from Queen Verexithra. The nanotechnology coursing through her veins wasn't just advanced, it was ancient. The energy patterns it emitted suggested a design far older than even the Exarath Empire itself. Lucas leaned back and ran a hand through his messy hair. What was he dealing with? The sound of the door sliding open snapped him out of his thoughts. He turned to see a tall Exarath guard standing in the doorway, his glowing eyes narrowing at Lucas. "The Queen requests your presence." Lucas nodded, quickly gathering his notes and equipment. As he followed the guard through the maze-like corridors of the palace, he felt the weight of every stare from the other Exarath. Their distrust was palpable. When they reached the Queen's private chamber, Lucas was surprised by its simplicity. Unlike the grand throne room, this space was calm and quiet, with walls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Queen Verexithra stood near a large oval-shaped window that overlooked the sprawling Exarath city below. "You've been studying the data," she said without turning to face him. "Yes, Your Majesty," Lucas replied, stepping forward cautiously. "I've learned a little more about the nanotechnology in your system. It's not just affecting your health. It seems to be interacting with your biology in ways I don't fully understand yet." The Queen turned to him, her violet eyes narrowing. "Explain." Lucas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The nanotechnology appears to be connected to you, almost as if it's enhancing certain parts of your physiology while suppressing others. I think it's why no Exarath healer has been able to help you. They've been treating the symptoms, not the source." The Queen studied him silently for a moment, her expression unreadable. "And what do you propose, human?" Lucas exhaled slowly. "I need to find out where this technology came from. If I can understand its purpose, I might be able to find a way to stabilize its effects, or remove it entirely." The Queen's gaze hardened. "Remove it? Do you think I would survive without it?" Lucas hesitated. "I don't know yet. That's why I need more time. And your trust." The Queen stepped closer, her towering presence making Lucas feel small. Trust is not freely given, human. But I have no choice. You will have what you need, but do not mistake this for leniency. Lucas nodded, his determination growing. I won't fail you, Your Majesty. As he left the chamber, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that this uneasy alliance was as fragile as the crystalline walls around him. Failure was not an option, but success would demand more than just science. It would require courage, creativity, and a level of trust that seemed impossible in a place like this. Lucas had spent the last few days working around the clock, his mind racing with new theories and ideas. The Queen's condition was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The nanotechnology embedded in her body was not just a random occurrence, it was purposeful. But who had created it? And why? He couldn't shake the feeling that something was hidden, something the Queen wasn't telling him. The more he studied the data, the more questions arose. There were patterns in the energy signatures, small anomalies that suggested the technology was not just biological. It was connected to something much larger. Late one evening, as Lucas pored over the scans again in his small chamber, a soft knock echoed at the door. He looked up, startled. "Enter," he called, wiping a hand over his face. The door slid open, revealing a familiar figure, Queen Verexithra, her regal presence filling the room like a storm. She stepped in, her silver skin shimmering faintly in the low light, her violet eyes fixed on him, piercing and unblinking. "I've been informed that you've made some progress," she said, her voice calm yet commanding. Lucas stood quickly, his heart racing. He had expected to continue his work in private, but now, with the Queen standing before him, everything felt too real. "I've discovered more about the technology inside you, Your Majesty. It's definitely not from Xarath. It's ancient, older than even your empire." The Queen's expression remained unreadable, but Lucas noticed her lips pressed together in a tight line. "What else?" she asked, her voice tinged with impatience. "There's something I don't understand," Lucas continued, choosing his words carefully. "The nanotechnology seems to be part of a larger system. It's designed to alter your biology, yes, but it also appears to have a deeper connection to your throne." A flicker of something crossed the Queen's face, anger, perhaps, or fear, but it was gone so quickly that Lucas wasn't sure. "You believe the technology is tied to my power?" she asked. Lucas nodded slowly. "I'm not sure how, but it looks like the nanotech is, amplifying certain abilities, strength, longevity, even the way your body heals. It's like it's keeping you in a state of perpetual balance, but it's also draining you. And the longer it stays in your system, the more unstable your condition becomes." The Queen's gaze darkened. "You are treading on dangerous ground, human. Do you understand what you are saying?" "I do," Lucas replied. "But I think I can fix it. I think if I can understand how this technology works, I can find a way to stabilize it." For the first time, the Queen's eyes softened, just a little. "And what will that cost you, Lucas? What will it cost your species?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned back to his notes, fingers skimming over the data once more. It was clear now. This wasn't just a disease. It was a weapon. "You should trust me," Lucas said finally, turning back to face her. "We can do this together." The Queen studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. "I will give you the time you need. But understand this, human. You may be the only one who can save me. If you fail, the consequences will be far greater than you realize." As she left the room, Lucas felt the weight of her words settle over him. The Queen's life was in his hands, and he was starting to understand that the stakes were far higher than he had ever imagined. Lucas hadn't slept in days. His mind was constantly working, the puzzle pieces of the Queen's affliction falling into place one by one. Yet despite his progress, something felt off. The tension in the palace was growing, thickening the air like a storm on the horizon. It wasn't just the Queen's condition that was worsening. There were whispers, too. Lucas had overheard enough to know that some of the Queen's advisors were growing increasingly uneasy. They didn't trust him, a human, with something so important. He could feel their eyes on him at every turn, their judgment heavy and unspoken. The worst part, the court was starting to fracture. One evening, as Lucas made his way to the Queen's chamber, he overheard a heated conversation between two of the Queen's top advisors. They were speaking in hushed tones, but Lucas, being so close, couldn't help but hear their words. This human, he's playing with forces he doesn't understand. The first advisor, a tall, thin seraph with black scales, said bitterly. The Queen's affliction is beyond his ability to cure. If she grows weaker, it will be his fault. The second advisor, a female seraph with a sharp jawline, scoffed. If we let him continue, the Queen may lose everything. We should end this now, before it's too late. Lucas froze, his heart sinking. He had feared this moment, but hearing it out loud was another matter. His work was not just under scrutiny, it was actively being opposed. With his mind racing, Lucas made his way to the Queen's chamber, hoping to find her alone. But when he entered, he found her surrounded by her most trusted guards and advisors, all of them in tense discussion. You've been working tirelessly, Lucas, the Queen said, her voice soft, but filled with a quiet authority. What have you learned? He hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the advisor's gaze on him. The technology in your system, it's more complicated than I first thought. I believe I've found a way to stabilize it, but I need more time to refine the process. The Queen nodded thoughtfully, her eyes scanning the room. Time. You ask for more time. But how much time do we have, Lucas? Before he could respond, one of the advisors stepped forward, his voice dripping with distrust. The Queen's life is slipping away with every passing day. This human claims he has the solution, but his methods are unproven. We cannot afford to wait any longer. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. It was happening. Doubt was growing, and the conspiracy was becoming more than just rumors. They were ready to act. The Queen's eyes locked onto the advisor who had spoken, and for the first time, Lucas saw a flicker of anger in her gaze. You question my trust in him, she asked coldly. The advisor bowed his head, clearly fearful. Your Majesty, we are simply concerned for your well-being. If this human fails, I will bear the consequences. The Queen interrupted, her voice steady. But I will not be swayed by fear or doubt. Lucas felt a surge of gratitude. The Queen was standing by him, but he knew her patience was running thin. The court was divided, and if he didn't find a solution soon, the forces against him would only grow stronger. As the meeting ended and the advisors reluctantly filed out, the Queen turned to Lucas. Do not disappoint me, human, she said quietly. You are the only one I trust now. Lucas nodded, his resolve hardening. The stakes had never been higher. If he failed, it wouldn't just be the Queen's life on the line. It would be the future of their fragile alliance. The days were beginning to blur together for Lucas. Exhaustion weighed on him, but his mind couldn't stop racing. Every moment spent in the Queen's presence, every scan, every analysis, felt like a piece of a grand puzzle that he couldn't quite finish. The stakes were too high. Queen Verixithra's life depended on his next move, and every passing hour made her condition more unstable. In the quiet of his small chamber, Lucas pored over the latest data. The nanotechnology inside the Queen's bloodstream was far more complex than anything humanity had encountered. It wasn't just a matter of removing it. The technology had fused with her biological systems in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. Yet there were patterns in the data that hinted at a solution. It was there, hidden beneath layers of complexity, waiting to be unlocked. Suddenly, an idea struck him. It was risky, dangerous, even, but it might just work. He could use the same nanotechnology to reverse some of the harmful effects, but only if he could find the exact sequence in the Queen's DNA that interacted with the nanotech. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot he had. As he prepared to make his next move, Lucas was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. His heart skipped a beat. He knew who it was. The Queen had come again. "Enter," Lucas called out, his voice betraying his anxiety. The doors slid open, and Queen Verexithra stepped inside. Her presence filled the room like a storm ready to break. Her violet eyes studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. "I've been informed that you found a potential solution," she said, her voice calm but with an edge of impatience. "What is it?" Lucas stood up, wiping his hands on his tunic. "I think I found a way to stabilize the nanotech in your system, Your Majesty. It won't be easy, but it could work." The Queen didn't respond right away. She simply stared at him, as if weighing his words before speaking again. "Explain it to me, and make it clear." Lucas exhaled slowly, gathering his thoughts. "The nanotechnology in your bloodstream is linked to your biological systems, but it's also unstable. It was designed to enhance your strength and longevity, but it's starting to break down. The key is to isolate the energy patterns within the nanotech and synchronize them with your own natural biology. If I can do that, I can reverse the damage and stabilize the system." The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, as if testing him. "And how do you plan to do that? Do you think you can just rewrite the technology?" "I'll be using a modified version of your own DNA," Lucas replied, his voice steady despite the growing tension. "We'll use the nanotech to restore balance, but it will require a direct link between you and the technology itself. I'll need to connect with you in a way that's never been done before." A long silence followed. Lucas could see the gears turning in the Queen's mind, her sharp intelligence weighing the risks. Finally, she spoke, her tone colder than before. "And what do you expect in return, human?" she asked. Lucas hesitated. "I want only your trust, Your Majesty. If this works, it will save you. If it doesn't, I won't hold anyone responsible but myself." The Queen stepped closer, her towering presence almost overwhelming. "You are asking for more than my life. You are asking for my trust. Proceed carefully, Lucas. You will have your chance. But know this, I will not forgive failure." Lucas nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth. The Queen had placed her faith in him, and now he had to deliver. There was no turning back. The tension in the palace had reached a boiling point. For days, Lucas had been working nonstop, preparing for the risky procedure to stabilize the Queen's nanotechnology. But even with all his preparations, there was a constant undercurrent of fear running through the air. He knew that time was running out. The Queen's condition was deteriorating faster than anyone had expected, and every day that passed made his task seem even more impossible. As he entered the Queen's private chamber, Lucas was greeted by her cold, calculating gaze. She sat on her throne, her silver skin shimmering faintly in the dim light of the room. Her eyes seemed to pierce through him, weighing him, testing him. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice calm but with an unmistakable edge. Lucas nodded, his heart racing. He had prepared everything. The modified device to synchronize with her nanotech, the data he had gathered, the protective measures to ensure that if something went wrong, the damage would be minimal. But nothing could truly prepare him for the weight of what he was about to do. "I'm ready, Your Majesty," Lucas replied, trying to steady his breathing. "But I need your full cooperation. If you resist in any way, it could make everything worse." The Queen didn't flinch. She simply gestured for him to begin. "Proceed, human. I trust you will not disappoint me." Lucas stepped closer, his fingers trembling slightly as he activated the device. The air around him seemed to hum with energy, and for a moment, everything felt too quiet. He could feel the weight of the Queen's gaze on him, but he forced himself to focus on the task at hand. As the device connected to the Queen's bloodstream, Lucas felt a shock of electricity rush through his body. It was as if her power was coursing through him, the nanotechnology sensing with his own systems. For a brief moment, he feared that he would lose control, but he steadied himself. He had to succeed. He had no other choice. But then, just as he was about to initiate the next phase, something unexpected happened. A loud crash echoed through the chamber. Lucas looked up, his heart leaping into his throat, as two of the Queen's guards burst into the room, weapons drawn. "Your Majesty," one of them shouted, "the court has revolted. The advisors have declared that you are no longer fit to rule." Lucas's mind raced. A coup. Now, he couldn't believe it. The Queen was in no condition to fight, and if the guards were turning on her. Before he could act, the Queen's voice rang out, strong and clear. "Step aside. I will deal with this." She rose from her throne, her body brimming with energy. The nanotechnology was still sensing with her, and Lucas could see the power slowly returning to her features. She was no longer the weakened queen he had been tending to. She was stronger, more dangerous, and more determined than ever before. The guards hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do. But the Queen's voice was like steel, cutting through their doubts. "I said, step aside." Without another word, the guards backed down, bowing their heads in submission. Lucas stared in awe. He had never seen the Queen like this before, strong, commanding, and unstoppable. For the first time, he realized just how much power she truly held. But as he watched the coup unfold, he couldn't help but feel a sinking feeling in his stomach. He had trusted the Queen, but had she truly trusted him? Or had she been using him all along, just another piece in her political game? The Queen turned back to him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and warning. "You've proven your loyalty, Lucas. But remember, loyalty is a dangerous thing in a place like this." Lucas nodded, his mind still racing. He had helped her, but at what cost? Would he survive the consequences of this fragile alliance? The palace was eerily quiet in the aftermath of the coup. The air was thick with tension, but beneath it all, a new energy surged through the Queen. The procedure Lucas had conducted earlier had worked. She was now stronger than she had been in weeks. Her body was once again under her full control, and the nanotechnology, though still present, had stabilized. But Lucas could see the toll it had taken on her. Queen Verexithra stood tall before him, her regal posture unwavering. The energy from the procedure had infused her with power, but the strain of it was evident in her eyes. There was something different about her now, something harder, more determined. She was a ruler, yes, but she was also a warrior. And Lucas realized then that she would never be the same. "Thank you," the Queen said quietly, her voice low but sincere. Her violet eyes met his, softening for just a moment. "You have given me more than I ever thought possible." Lucas stood in stunned silence. He had done what he had set out to do. He had saved her life. But the feeling of accomplishment was fleeting, replaced by a growing unease. The palace had not returned to peace. The revolt was only the beginning, and the court was still divided. "There is still much to be done," Lucas said, his voice steady despite the swirl of thoughts in his mind. "The rebellion may be over for now, but the factions in the court will not forget this. You have shown them your strength, but your enemies are not defeated." The Queen's gaze hardened, her resolve returning. "I know." She took a step closer to Lucas, her presence overwhelming. "But this will not be the last challenge I face. I've spent my life ruling with an iron fist, but I've realized that true power does not come from fear. It comes from trust." Lucas met her gaze, feeling a mix of admiration and confusion. "Trust." The Queen nodded. "Yes. Trust in those who stand by you. Trust in those who are willing to sacrifice for you." Her voice softened, and for the first time, Lucas saw a glimpse of the person she might have been before the weight of the crown took its toll. "I've asked much of you, human. You've given me your loyalty. But now I must give you something in return." Lucas felt his heart race. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" Queen Verexithra took a deep breath, her shoulders lifting and then dropping in a slow sigh. "I will not allow the rebellion to take my throne, not without a fight. But you, Lucas, you have proven your worth. You have saved me when no one else could." And for that, you have my loyalty in return." She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of gratitude and trust. The touch was brief, but it felt like an unspoken promise. Lucas, in that moment, understood the weight of what she had just said. She was offering him something that no one else had ever been offered: a place at her side, a voice in her decisions, a partner in the survival of her empire. "But there's a cost," the Queen added, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" Lucas asked, his voice tinged with confusion. "Trust is not a simple thing to give, Lucas," she replied. "And loyalty can be a dangerous thing. The court will not forgive what I have done. I will have to sacrifice more than I ever thought I would to ensure that you and I remain safe." Lucas's heart sank as he realized the weight of her words. The Queen had fought for her survival, and in doing so, she had put them both in danger. But there was something else in her eyes, something that spoke of a bond between them that had only deepened in the face of adversity. "You may be the only one I trust now, Lucas," the Queen said, her voice steady. "And that trust will either save us or destroy us." Lucas met her gaze, knowing that this was the beginning of a new chapter in their fragile alliance. There was no turning back now. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, but together, they might just be able to survive whatever came next. The days after the coup were tense. Queen Verexithra had regained control, but the palace was still divided. Her enemies in the court had not forgiven her for placing her trust in a human, and many of them whispered in the shadows, questioning her decision. Some even plotted behind closed doors, waiting for the right moment to strike. Yet, despite the rising tensions, the Queen remained unwavering. Her strength, enhanced by the nanotechnology Lucas had helped stabilize, kept her powerful, but it was her will that kept her in control. And Lucas? He had become more than just a healer. He had become her confidant, her ally, and the only human the Queen truly trusted. As the weeks passed, Lucas found himself standing in the center of a political storm. The court's factions were slowly realizing that the human was not as easily dismissed as they had once believed. Lucas's knowledge of technology, his calm under pressure, and his ability to help the Queen when no one else could had earned him respect, but not without consequences. The whispers had started to turn into open discussions about his role in the palace. Some saw him as a necessary ally, while others saw him as a dangerous threat to the empire's hierarchy. Lucas knew that he had earned a place at the Queen's side, but he also knew that it was a precarious position. If he made even the smallest mistake, it could cost him everything. The court's loyalty was fragile, and any sign of weakness in the Queen's rule could tip the scales. One evening, as he walked through the palace halls, he was stopped by one of the Queen's advisors, a sharp-eyed Xerath named Irena's. The advisor had never been particularly friendly toward him, but there was something in his gaze now that made Lucas uneasy. "You've earned your place here, human," Irena said, his voice quiet but filled with meaning. "But don't mistake the Queen's trust for permanent favor. The court is not as forgiving as she is." Lucas nodded, sensing the warning in Irena's words. He had expected something like this. The Queen's loyalty to him might have saved her life, but it wasn't enough to erase the years of distrust the court held toward humans. "I'm aware," he replied, keeping his tone even. Irena studied him for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "Good. Just remember that in this palace, loyalty can be as dangerous as betrayal." With that, the advisor turned and walked away, leaving Lucas standing in the hallway. The words lingered in his mind, heavy with meaning. He had trusted the Queen, and she had trusted him. But trust, as he had learned, was a double-edged sword. It could bring success, or it could bring ruin. Later that night, the Queen summoned him to her private chambers. As Lucas entered, he saw her standing by the window, her back to him. The light from the city below reflected off her silver skin, making her appear almost otherworldly. She turned to face him, her violet eyes locking onto his. "Have you heard the rumors?" she asked softly, her voice calm but tinged with something he couldn't quite place. Lucas nodded. I've heard enough. The Queen's expression softened, but there was a quiet strength in her eyes. They will never accept you, Lucas, not completely. But they will have to accept the truth. You saved my life. And for that, you have earned a place in this empire. Lucas felt a surge of gratitude, but it was tempered by the weight of her words. And what happens now, Your Majesty? We move forward, she said simply. But know this, your presence here means more than just your skills. It's a symbol. To some, you represent a new future. To others, you represent a threat. And as long as you stand by my side, there will be those who will try to destroy what we've built. Lucas stood silently, absorbing her words. The Queen had trusted him, but the road ahead was still uncertain. The power struggle within the court would continue, and he was right in the middle of it. But as he met the Queen's gaze, he realized that he wasn't just a pawn in her game anymore. He was part of something much larger, a chance for humanity to find its place among the stars. The path ahead would be dangerous, but together, they might just survive it. The days following their conversation felt like a turning point for both Lucas and Queen Verexithra. The palace was still a place of uncertainty, but a strange new sense of determination seemed to settle over them. The Queen was more confident than ever, her authority unshaken by the earlier revolt. Yet, as much as she appeared unstoppable, Lucas could see the weight of leadership pressing on her. The court was still divided, and her trust in him was not enough to erase years of distrust and suspicion. But for the first time since he had arrived, Lucas felt a sense of purpose. He had helped save the Queen's life, and in doing so, he had unknowingly become part of something bigger than he could have imagined. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer a question. It was a challenge that Lucas was now tied to, whether he liked it or not. The Queen had given him a rare opportunity, one that no human had ever had before. She had trusted him with not just her life, but with the future of the Hareth Empire. And while that trust was still fragile, it had forged a bond between them that neither could ignore. One evening, as Lucas was working late in his lab, there was a sudden knock on the door. He looked up to see a familiar figure standing in the doorway. The Queen herself. I've been informed that you're making progress on the diplomatic outreach for humanity, she said, her voice calm but firm. Lucas nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. I've been meeting with some of the leaders of the minor colonies. I think we can start building relationships, showing them that humans can be trusted. The Queen studied him carefully. Do you believe this will work? Lucas paused. It wasn't an easy question to answer. He had no idea if the alliances would succeed, if the other species would ever truly accept humanity. But he knew that it was the first step, and he knew that he had to try. I believe it's worth trying, Lucas said finally. We've come this far, Your Majesty. If we don't take the next step, we'll never know what's possible. The Queen nodded slowly, her expression softening. You've become more than I expected, human. She paused, considering her next words carefully. I once believed that humanity was nothing more than an insignificant species, an obstacle in our path. But you've shown me something different. Lucas felt a knot tighten in his chest, but he didn't speak. He had heard the Queen's words, but there was still an uncertainty lingering in his mind. The challenges ahead were far from over, and the court's reaction to their growing bond could turn dangerous at any moment. I may have given you my trust, the Queen continued, her voice quieter now. But that does not mean you have earned the full loyalty of the Empire. There are many who will never accept you, Lucas. There are many who will always see you as a threat. Lucas met her gaze, understanding the weight of her words. I'm ready for that, he said. But with you by my side, I think we can change things, together. The Queen studied him for a long moment before nodding, a slight smile playing at the corner of her lips. Perhaps, we shall see. She turned to leave but paused at the door. Remember, Lucas, the future of humanity is not just in your hands. It's in all of ours. And the road ahead will be long and difficult. But if you stand by me, I will make sure humanity has a place here. As the door closed behind her, Lucas stood there for a moment, absorbing everything she had said. The challenges would be great, and the road ahead uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were no longer just two individuals bound by circumstance. They were partners, and together, they would face whatever came next. The future was still unknown, but Lucas knew one thing for sure: he wasn't alone anymore. And that, for the first time, felt like hope.